Welcome to Seize the Mains Daily Answer Writing. I'm Surbhi Sardana and I'm taking this lecture discussion series on mains answer writing for UPSC and state civil services. If you're new to this initiative, you can download the timetable till May 3rd, that is 1 month before prelims, from the link in the description below. Let's see what is the topic for today. So it's day 34 of Seize the Mains and our topic for today is from GS paper 2, Salient Features of Representation of People's Act or RPA Acts of 1950 and 1951. These topics or this particular topic is very important for your prelims point of view and also for mains. Many twisted questions have been asked in prelims as well as mains from this area, so make sure that you prepare this very strongly for both the stages of the exam. So let's see what is the question for today, and before I display the question, make sure that you have a pen and a paper handy with you to note down the points that you learned during this video and also to make the structure of your own answer. Pause the video, decide the structure for your answer, try to understand the question in detail and then proceed on to watching the rest of the video. So let's look at the question. According to a recent data, around 5,000 criminal cases are pending against MPs and MLAs in various courts across the country. In the light of the above, discuss the need of simplification of procedures for disqualification under RPA. Answer in 150 words for 10 marks and share the answers for this question in the next 24 hours at this given email ID rmiasmainswriting@gmail.com. So this appears to be a very long question and a very tricky one, but it is not so. The question is only there in the last line of this paragraph, in the last two lines. So what UPSC plays the trick with is that it confuses you with such long paragraphs in the question or even longer than these, or some tough words or some relevant or irrelevant data which might not be used as which might not be helpful for your answer. So it is just to trick you, it is just to confuse your brain. So let's break this question. Let's see what is the question actually talking about. So according to a recent data, around 5,000 criminal cases are pending against MPs and MLAs in various courts across the country. So this is just the data part of it. This is the data by amicus curiae appointed by the Supreme Court for helping with the fast track resolution of cases against MPs and MLAs. So this was in current affairs in January. So just go back to your current affairs section and check out this data. In the light of the above, you know, this criminalization of politics, that these many criminal cases are pending against the legislatures of the country, members of legislatures of the country. So there is criminalization of politics taking place. So in the light of the above, data, what does this data represent? Criminalization of politics. Discuss the need of simplification of procedures for disqualification. Discuss the need of simplification. If there is some simplification in RPA required, means non-simplification or over-detailing is a problem with Representation of People's Act. There must be some problems which are prevailing with RPA as of now, due to which criminalization of politics has not been curtailed. So we just have to talk about what is the need of simplification of provisions in RPA Act. So this is your question. You just have to talk about the need part of it. Need of simplification in the light of above data, that what is the need of simplifying it so that criminalization in politics can be controlled. So answer in 150 words for 10 marks. So this is a very short answer. You just have to quickly address whatever is asked in the question. As usual, we'll start by writing a good introduction, and our introduction always is a conversation with the examiner, the first step that you take before entering into the room of the answer. So according to this question, what should be there, what should we be talking about in the introduction? We should be talking about the RPA Act itself. So we will give a brief detail about RPA Act. We'll tell what are the procedures for disqualification under RPA Act in case of criminal cases against politicians contesting elections or against people who are participating in the legislatures of the country. So we'll talk about those and then we'll move on to address the need part of the question. So moving on to writing the introduction. So RPA deals with the actual conduct of elections within the country, the requirements that are there for the qualification as well as disqualification. So here we'll talk about the disqualification part of RPA. So the Representation of People's Act mentions the criteria for disqualifying a person for contesting an election of the legislature. This is the detailed section 8 of RPA. Let me read this out for you. Section 8 of the Act, which is about disqualification on conviction, that when a person has been declared criminal or has been awarded a punishment, so disqualification on conviction for certain offences according to which an individual punished with a jail term of more than 2 years cannot stand in an election for 6 years after he has been released from jail. So these provisions include, this is just in bracket, you can choose to write it in your introduction or completely ignore it. Just say that section 8 of RPA deals with disqualification of members who have been convicted of certain offences, not against whom cases are pending. So these provisions include disqualification on the grounds of election offences, conviction for any offence resulting in the imprisonment of 2 or more years, failure to give account of election expenses within time, corruption or disloyalty, holding office under government company, promoting enmity between different groups, or offence of bribery and preaching or practicing of social crimes like untouchability, dowry, etc. So these are this is the broad makeup of section 8, or the disqualification procedures or the grounds for disqualification enlisted in RPA Act of 1951, RPA 1951. So this part and this part is your introduction. Now, using a linkage point, we'll move on to address that the need for simplification of procedure for for disqualification of persons has been listed below or has been discussed below. So first thing is that the very interpretation of RPA. So there are many times where certain sections or certain parts of RPA are not in consonance with the interpretation of judiciary or the way RPA has been framed. For example, talking about this conviction under certain offences. Cases stay pending for a very long time in our courts, and sometimes what happens is that a lower court gives a free pass to the person who has against whom a complaint has been filed, and a higher court awards punishment, or vice versa. So how do we decide, or how do we decide the time frame for deciding a punishment or for deciding disqualification? So that is always there. These are some issues which come with respect to judiciary when it comes to RPA. So the judicial interpretation of section 8 part 3 of the Act has not been very satisfactory. You must have read about this in very many of the editorials, that time and again the judiciary and the legislature is not in consonance. The interpretations of both are not in consonance with each other. Sometimes the MPs or MLAs want something, but the Supreme Court comes up with a different kind of interpretation. So an order of remission does not wipe out conviction. For actual disqualification, what is necessary is the actual sentence by the court. The crime has to be proved in the court, irrespective of the kind of crime it is. So that is a major hurdle that a lot of criminals are also sitting in our legislatures. So where will our democracy head towards? It is not within the power of the appellate court to suspend the sentence. It can only suspend the execution of the sentence pending the appeal. And the last part is that sometimes even when the sentence has been suspended, so at that time the disqualification cannot be taken back. So once disqualified cannot be taken, once disqualified stays disqualified, and that cannot be reversed back. So this was about the broad legal issues. You don't have to write all of them. Whatever you can understand and present with valid articles or with valid examples, just choose to write only that part and move ahead to addressing the further parts of this answer. The second is about pendency of cases. So as I told you earlier, that only when a person has been convicted, only when a person has been given a sentence of 2 years or more, only then he or she is disqualified. But what about the pendency of cases? We know that there are millions of pending cases in the judiciary, in the Indian judicial system, and many of these are against MPs and MLAs. So if a person has committed a crime and his or her case is pending in some judicial court, so what are we portraying to the world, and how justifiable it is to have such people in our legislatures. So as per section 8, a person is disqualified for contesting election only on conviction by the court of law. The law does not include provisions for barring individuals who have criminal cases pending against them. So this is a major hurdle. There have been many demands and many steps by Supreme Court and various judicial bodies to curb those people, to prevent those people from contesting elections who have been charged off, who have been blamed for heinous crimes like rapes, murders, etc. So due to the huge pendency of cases in courts, conviction is getting delayed. So this is a major hurdle. The third is limitations of Election Commission of India. So this constitutional body serves in its legal limits which have been prescribed in RPA 1951. So since RPA 1951 puts a limit on Election Commission of India, the limits of RPA itself are a hurdle to the smooth functioning of Election Commission of India. There are many times when election commissioners see that something has been committed wrong, there has been a lot of illegal funding or paid news has been there, but there are no separate provisions in the RPA itself to lodge cases explicitly for these people, because RPA is very old and there are a lot of amendments required according to the need of time. For example, this paid advertisements on social media, they were not being addressed for a very long period of time. So that is the problem here. Election Commission of India has no power to call off elections based on electoral offences, as these are tried in High Court, which leads to legal hassles and low conviction. So even in the cases of corrupt practices which comes under the ECI, it doesn't include provisions of paid media, hate speech, money power, etc. There have been many simultaneous solutions that we have been proposing, electoral bonds, simultaneous elections and whatnot, but the issue of illegal funding, of funding from illegitimate resources, paid news, paid media, they are overarching issues, and Election Commission of India has only one route: to directly approach the High Court on basic legal grounds, not on specific legal grounds. So hence the role of RPA needs to increase here. The last point here is very simple, that the rate of conviction in India, people who are actually awarded jail terms, who are actually punished with terms in jail or things like that, with sentences for the crimes they have committed, that is very low. The conviction rate in India is very low. First of all, there is pendency of cases. Secondly, conviction rate is very low. And people who are MPs and MLAs, obviously they have a lot of political influence, they have a lot of financial influence, they have a lot of economic power, especially in their regions. So what is the guarantee that if they are not convicted, they are not convicted by a certain court, what is the guarantee that they have not used their influence to win a certain case? What is the guarantee? And we know that it happens from time to time. So have they, if they've been given a clean chit by the judiciary, so how true is that? How truthful that decision is? How can we believe that they've not used their influence? Already the conviction rates in India are so low, and they are like almost negligible for MPs and MLAs, for especially the party in power. So according to a report by Association of Democratic Reforms in 2014, 30% of sitting MPs and MLAs were facing criminal proceedings against them, but of that only 0.5% were convicted. So is that rationally possible? Is it a rational statement that for criminal charges around 30% of people are being blamed, but only 0.5% of them are being held responsible or are being convicted? So given the influence that legislatures hold, they are less likely to be convicted, hence leading to criminalization of politics. So this is an overarching issue. These were the broad issues that had to be discussed. This is a very short answer. So either draw the headings, draw a tree diagram, and then use some keywords to elaborate them. For example, points like these. Express, you know why these diagrams are necessary? Because while you're writing your answers on the answer sheet, your answer will go from like 1 to second or to third page. So when the examiner is checking your answer, in the first sight itself, he will understand that these are the points this aspirant has addressed, and he or she knows and understands all points of this issue. So you are more likely to be awarded more marks in less period of time, without inviting the irk of the examiner of turning the pages again and again. So make sure that you have a lot of flowcharts. You can use this kind of diagram also for the 5 points here, or just go on to writing the headings like this and elaborate in 1 or 2 sentences, because this is a 150 words answer, so adhere to the word limit. So moving on to the last part, this is very much related to what we discussed in point of Election Commission of India. So RPA has not been successful in curbing the money and muscle power in India. So even after all the things in place, all the things right in black and white, we have not been able to address this issue of money and muscle power. A lot of forced voting takes place, a lot of bogus voting takes place, and there are so many issues which arise from this very fact, which lead to more and more criminalization of politics. So muscle power is not even defined by the act. Money limits have been breached using different means. For like electoral bonds was one such solution which we came up with on the recommendation of Law Commission of India to address this illegal funding or electoral funding. We came up with this solution. And putting a curb, putting an upper ceiling on the funding that that these political parties can get. But what they did was they received multiple fundings in that bracket. For example, donations were split into amounts of less than 20,000 for evading reporting. So more than 20,000 had to be reported, more than 20,000 rupees, 20,000 of funding had to be reported for a very long period of time. But what these parties came up with the idea that these people were receiving funding of like 19,500 rupees or 19,400 rupees, and fundings from these particular sources in these like numbers, they were happening multiple times to evade reporting. So there have been instances of political influences by the MPs and MLAs over the witness and the whistleblowers, thereby diluting the case against them. So this relates to the fourth point that we started, that there is a lower rate, a very minuscule rate of conviction in India, especially against MPs and MLAs. So this is one of the reasons behind them, because they use a lot of their influence, a lot of money and muscle power, not only to get votes but to scare people, to scare the whistleblowers who are acting against them. So protection for whistleblowers is required. Now these were the 5 points which signified the need for simplification of procedures in RPA, because having complicated procedures results in evasion of such rules by people in power and by people with criminal backgrounds. So let's see what can be the way forward or conclusion for it. So the given data which was given in the question, it highlights the increasing instance of criminalization of politics, and now we'll conclude by giving a way forward. What was especially a simplification of RPA is necessary, but what is the more way forward, or what is the conclusion that we can have here? You can also say that criminalization of politics has not been prevented, so there are a lot of amendments required. You can conclude like that, or you can give this list of suggested measures. For example, setting up of fast track courts to address the pendency of cases, and Supreme Court has come up with this idea, and that is where from where the recent data that 5,000 cases are pending against these MPs and MLAs who are sitting in the legislatures. So that has come from there only. So fast track courts are being set in the country, barring those from contesting elections who have been charged for heinous crimes. Giving protection to whistleblowers, just like we discussed right now, and witnesses, and setting up of an independent agency to investigate electoral offences. So that will also require an amendment to RPA. So these are directly or indirectly related to amendments that we need in RPA, and the kind of simplification or the detailing that RPA needs, because this is the need of time. recently, like around in December, there was a recent amendment in RPA which revolved around linking voter ID with Aadhaar cards. So that amendment has been put in place, and a question from that part is expected, that how justifiable it is, how justified it is, because Election Commission of India, who decides the authenticity of voters, is a constitutional body, and on the other hand, indirectly, like linking voter IDs to Aadhaar cards gives that control of recognizing citizenship or voting rights, gives that control indirectly to UIDAI, the authority that gives you the Aadhaar card. So how justified is that amendment, or can you use this as a positive way forward or a positive point in your answer? So make sure that you learn about that, study about RPA in detail for prelims also. Now you can download the PDF for this presentation from the link in the description below. Send your answers to us in the next 24 hours. Prelims is approaching, so make sure that you are able to balance your preparation between prelims and mains. Devote most of your day to prelims because it's very near, and that will decide your further journey. So giving just 1 hour to this mains answer writing with us is more than enough, and that is the need of the time. Also try to increase your study hours, because as time approaches you will have lesser and lesser time to finish the syllabus and then to revise it again and again. So make sure that you are up to date with all the targets you have set. Note down all your targets on a diary or on a page of paper. Do a planned preparation. Whatever you are reading, whatever you are writing, just note it down somewhere, because you will tend to forget whatever you have studied, whatever the books you have read at a later date. So when you come back to your index, when you see that you've noted it down somewhere, you know that that part of the syllabus has already been done by you, so you will not freak out over it. So wishing you all the best. Keep working hard, keep sharing your answers, and see you with another discussion tomorrow.